Hello and welcome again to Revive Stories. It is so good to see you and to be with you for another episode. It's our third week of doing these. We've been having so much fun, and today we are joined by Sija, amazing member of our church, good friend of mine. We're so excited to find a little bit more about his story. Sija, thanks so much for joining us on the show, man.
No, man, thanks for inviting me. It's been really cool watching the first couple, and I'm super excited to also share a little bit about myself as well.
Fantastic, man. Well, yeah, what we like to do is we kind of like to get into it and start kind of right from the beginning, or I don't know how far back we're going to go or you want to take us, but hey, you can lead the ship today.
Cool.
Maybe early kind of your early childhood, like where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to high school? Things like that.
Cool. No, yeah, so I grew up, so I was born in Zimbabwe actually. I grew up there for the first 7 years of my life, and then we moved to England to a place called Sheffield, where I lived there for about 3 years. My brother stayed there for about 5 years. And then I came to South Africa in about 2009, 2010. And from then on, I went to Parklands College. You know, yeah, I went to Parklands College, prestigious school, highly acclaimed, and everything. And yeah, so from about grade four all the way to matric, I was at Parklands College, and yeah, that's pretty much my childhood. Yeah.
Amazing. And what are you doing? Like, what do you do now? Like, what are you busy with at the moment?
Yeah.
After
Currently,
matriculating, because obviously you finished at Parklands College, so doing something else now.
yeah, no. So currently, I'm studying. I'm doing a BBA in hospitality operations management.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, directly after school. So I'm 23, turning 24 now. Directly after school, I did a year to serve at
Hmm.
what was then View Church Sandale, but it's our church. I did a year to serve there, and then after that, due to like visa problems and everything, there was a bit of a delay in starting my studies. But now all my paperwork is clear and in order, and yeah, I'm currently enjoying my studies, going into my second year now.
Fantastic, man. Well, listen, maybe we can start off by chatting a little bit about maybe early, maybe perceptions of church, or like were you involved in like church growing up, younger? Was it something you got introduced to later in life? And what was maybe the early experiences like with it and getting to know Jesus and God? And obviously, you're super involved now and serving, but it's
Mm.
always fun to hear how it all began because it's all quite normal for so many
Yeah.
people, but it's great to hear the story as well.
No, so yeah, when we were young, obviously Zimbabwe is quite a religious place. So when we were young, we used to go to church and everything. One of our uncles is actually a pastor, so we used to attend
Ah,
his church growing up. But obviously, I was a kid. I was just in like Sunday school all the time. I didn't really know what was happening. And then when we went to England, it wasn't really, it wasn't something that we ever, continued on with.
mm,
We didn't really, church wasn't something that we did. And so it kind of fell away. And then even coming to South Africa for the first, good while, we didn't do church or anything like that. Until I actually met you, where Phil was my cricket or my rugby coach, and yeah, it was pretty strange. He invited me to this thing called Life Group, which I'd never heard of. I thought it was sounded pretty culty, in all honesty. And so we just like rocked up to a house. Yeah, just a bunch of other people my age, like having fun, kicking ball and stuff. And yeah, that's how I first really got introduced into our church. Funny story, actually. The first I remember when Phil eventually invited us to church. The first day, I actually remember like looking like whilst I was getting ready and getting changed and stuff. I was actually so stressed because I didn't have any like formal like pants. So I was wearing jeans, and I remember apologizing to Phil and being like, I'm so sorry, I only have jeans. I thought it would be like this super formal event. When Phil was like, okay, cool, cool, bro. So yeah, that was really my perceptions of church. I thought it was like, something super formal and like whatever. So it was really refreshing coming to a church where, I could really be myself, could be very, relaxed and that kind of thing. So yeah.
You probably like were apologizing for wearing jeans, and I was probably like in shorts or ripped jeans with massive holes in them. I had to
Pretty
learn.
much.
I had to learn from an early age. Yeah, man, those were such, even just thinking about that, those were such good memories, and
Mm.
that was such a cool time. And maybe from your side, like, so that was maybe like when you were about like 16.
Yeah.
So you were like kind of, getting older, moving through high school, and then getting involved in church. What were some of the things that maybe started to, let's even use the word, like maybe change in your life in terms of your thinking, or maybe even your priorities as you started to get involved with Jesus and building a relationship?
Yeah, no, I think yeah, things really did change quite hectically. I think it was yeah, and I don't know. I think maybe before coming to church, and it was kind of just like doing, kind of just going with the flow, like, hanging out with my friends, and
Yeah.
trying to follow the path that, like, is like, laid out before, like, okay, I'm in school now, I just need to get good marks, go to uni, get a good job, just follow the generic, lifestyle. But I think after I like got saved and yeah, really got planted in the church, I think, yeah, I don't know how to say this without sounding like pretentious, but there was like like my perspective on life kind of changed, and like, there was a lot more, like, those kind of things became like a lot less important,
Mm,
which they are like really big things, but they weren't really my major focus. And it was kind of like having my eyes set on like an eternal, like,
yeah.
you know, kind of, view where, now obviously it's really nice to have a nice job and to have, a big family, and all of that kind of stuff. But it all kind of like, if you have all of that and don't have, salvation, and all kind of means nothing in the big
Mm,
scheme of things. So those kind of became secondary, and it was kind of hard to like, to be 16 when, like, everyone else has like a certain way of doing things, and
yeah.
you are thinking that same way, to like portray that without sounding like, get a load of this guy, like, who thinks he's
Yeah.
like something better than us, or that kind of thing. So yeah, it was tough, I'll be honest, but it was, yeah, it
That's
was.
it's so true, like what you're saying there. Like I have like the utmost respect for like you and your brother immensely, because when I was in high school, and maybe even the people that are watching here, like when you find Jesus. So like I started going to church when I was 15, but I
Yeah.
still kind of lived. I was in boarding school, so I could almost like go to boarding school and still live a different way,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And like I could, I was still doing things that I knew in my heart, like, okay, I don't think these things are what's God's plan for my life, what's like building
Yeah.
into my life. But it's so much easier when you're in high school to go with the flow, and like to go with the current, and to like what everybody else is doing, you just do it because you don't, like you're saying, coming across a certain way or
Mm.
looking a certain way. So like even that, and maybe even if you can remember a moment or two in high school when like, because I remember you guys, like it really was a change, and you guys did start to do things differently and stuff. What was that experience like in high school? Were people like maybe more understanding than maybe that I'm giving them credit for? Or was
Yeah.
there a challenge or two, like getting saved in your teens and then like almost trying to, because like, yeah, you guys just did it a lot better than I think I did it.
No, I think, yeah, I think you're right. I think a big thing as well is for, like, for yourself and for myself as well. Like, when it's different when you're like, if you get saved at like a younger age, like, 12 or 13, because then it's almost like you have that like foundation from the beginning. But when you are like 15 or 16, or whatever, and you've already been like, living one way, your friends expect you to act one way, and then all of a sudden it's like a massive change. It's almost like, yeah, it's like a big like shift. And in all honesty, like, if I'm being honest, I think a lot, like, most of my friends were quite understanding,
That's cool.
so it wasn't like super difficult. But there were moments where I think, um you know like I said earlier, where my friends maybe would be going, in one direction, and it's something that, I perhaps had a conviction about, or like, it wasn't super comfortable with, which like they didn't totally understand.
Yeah.
But in general, I do think, I was quite lucky to have, quite a lot of friends who, weren't necessarily Christians or believers, but, were kind of super understanding and were very, kind of gracious. Obviously, there were a couple of jokes and there as teenagers do, as
Yeah.
the standard, and luckily as well, those a few of my friends actually did start, joining me at youth and at
Yeah.
church and stuff, which was really helpful. But yeah, no, I think that's the.
I remember, yeah, geez, those were good times. We had a lot of fun. Maybe even just moving on slightly, you especially, you got very involved in church and got involved in different ministries. So even before we talk about that, I'd love to kind of ask you like what your journey was like with like scripture and prayer, and it, like kind of those early days of building a relationship, because that's really what it's all about. And it's those early days of getting into the Word,
Yeah.
getting to know God on that intimate, like relational level. But that also is like sometimes it's a challenging thing if you don't
Yeah.
know how to read the Bible, where to start, and then even engaging with Him in prayer. What was that kind of journey like for you? And maybe you can even tell us a little bit how it's grown or developed, over the past few years.
Yeah, no, I think a big like big challenges, especially when I first got saved, it was like a big thing of like you're actually on fire for God, and like you have like all of this energy and you're like, I really want to be, like I really want more from God, but you actually have no idea what to do with that energy and like how to like handle that excitement. And yeah, it was difficult because you have this like fire, and then like uh not necessarily that it like dies down, but you just don't know how to like you know like I've really struggled with reading scripture in the beginning. Even
Mm.
my prayer life was really tough. I actually set myself a challenge. I remember in the beginning I was like, you know what, I'm gonna read the Bible from like the beginning all the way to the end, because I
Oh
thought
my God.
that's a way to like begin. And I remember
Yeah.
reading and being like, oh, Genesis cool, Exodus cool stories, man. And then like you get to like Numbers and like
Oh,
Leviticus, and you're like, cool. I have no
hey.
idea what's happening here. But I think it was just like almost like a naivety in the beginning
Mm.
of like just thinking, okay, now I'm a Christian. I just have to read my Bible. I have to pray. I just tick them off, and yeah, I'm doing a good job. And I think there was after that initial high, because there was no real relationship or something like that, that kind of died down eventually. But yeah, just through actually understanding and like walking with God further, that I actually started cultivating that. And even recently, I think it's something that took me really long to understand, but even just something recently, for example, with myself, Dumi, and Jordan have started like a Bible study.
I love
um,
that.
and yeah, we've just been going through scripture, and I think that's when I realized that like it's not necessarily a thing of like reading these massive passages of scripture, just wolfing them down, and then just forgetting about it. But it's about like
Mm.
even if it's just reading a couple of scriptures, really meditating on it, really understanding what God is trying to say through that scripture. Because I think a big conviction of mine is like every single word written in the Bible. There's no idle word in the Bible.
Mm.
God, placed each and every single word in there for a purpose, and it's up
Yeah.
to us to kind of see what God is trying to say through that.
Yeah.
And if we're reading these like massive scriptures and we're like just getting the general idea or like whatever, we kind of miss the intricate or like more personal things that God might be trying to share with us. So yeah, that's something
Mm.
that I think I've matured
Love
in
that.
that sense of like really trying to engage with God and
Mm.
through scripture, through prayer, and yeah.
Very good. Maybe at the risk of putting you on the spot a bit, is there maybe a scripture that you've read? It could have been a few years ago, or maybe one that's more recently that you like to hold on to, or it's always close to memory, or it's one that you like to think about or share with people,
Mm.
just while we're talking on scripture.
Yeah, something actually in our Bible study, something that something I've read, and like, you always just read it and kind of go past. But something I've been thinking about a lot recently was in Romans 1, I think it's 16, where it's Paul speaking, and he just speaks about, it says, for I will not be ashamed of the gospel, and I will proclaim it boldly. Something like that. I feel like I'm paraphrasing, and I might be,
that's in
whatever.
there. That's in
Yeah,
there.
no, it's I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but yeah, it's just, that's something kind of how I want to live my life, where, no matter what. And I think, yeah, just even with Paul's story, like, everything that he went through, and all the persecution he faced, to still have that boldness, and to not be ashamed of, like, the gospel truth, and to just go out and proclaim it. That's the kind of way that I want to live my life. And so that's something that has really, I've been reminded of a lot, and yeah, something that I've been thinking about a lot.
That's amazing. I think a big part of your story as well is you kind of like threw yourself like into church, and got involved like from a very kind of young age, and
Yeah.
you didn't discriminate. You did everything and anything, whatever there was available to do, you got involved in. And obviously now you're very involved in the worship ministry, which is, such an amazing team with amazing people. Maybe even to just speak into that, like the role that played. I mean, whether it was like when you were like first joining and holding up signs, or serving in youth, or wherever it was, like, why did you do that? Why did you find yourself getting involved? And if you say because Phil told you to, then everybody's going to know you're a liar. But even from a personal place, why did you kind of see the need to do that and to get involved?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's just something I've always like really like. I've always been someone who enjoys helping people, and yeah, I think, yeah, that's I think a big part. But I think as well, it was always somewhere that I could feel like I was part of a community, and yeah, something that stood out. I think when we've done like growth track, and DNA now, it's something about, like, when you are serving, and when you are putting your all into something, you almost become a member instead of just a viewer. And I think that's a kind of like, I think that's where I first got saved, through like just coming to youth and life group and whatever. But I think what really kept me is being feeling like I belong to to the church, and that kind of thing. And that was through serving. So yeah, in the beginning it was coming through to youth early, and helping set up and do all that kind of stuff, and even at church holding up signs, and then eventually leading in youth, and in worship as well. So yeah, that's something I just always like. I always felt like helping people was something that I was really I've always just had a passion for.
That's so good. I love that progression of like, you get somewhere like by attending a Raven Dealers, but you really like, it really becomes like home. And it feels like you're a part of what God is doing, when you get involved. So I resonate with that big time. I think maybe even as we close, and a lot of these questions I didn't prep Sija answer. He's doing very well here. Maybe even just to close, looking at your life and your experiences, and the ups and the downs, the strengths and the weaknesses, if you were to give somebody some advice that's on the Christian journey, that that could be anywhere on the journey. Maybe they're reluctant to come to church, maybe they've come to church, maybe they're thinking about going deeper with God and building in the relationship. What bit of advice would you give them, based purely on your experiences and things that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think like a major thing is just it's such a cliche, but like just surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, and not, that's, yeah, I feel like we often say this kind of stuff, but like not necessarily just trying to do things by yourself, and being like I can like push through, but like surrounding yourself with like-minded Christian people who are on the same journey, and yeah, so like not necessarily like closing yourself off from other people who, because I think that was a challenge for me in the beginning, because when I first got saved, I was like, you know what, I actually need to cut all these other sinners in my life. They're so different. But that's really not the vibe at all. But really let the people who are speaking into you be people who can speak life-giving things into your life. Yeah, for me, it was, being surrounded by people like you, Phil, and Sarah, and a whole bunch of other people as well. People who could speak into my life, and it was such an encouragement in those moments where my own prayer life and my own faith life wasn't necessarily going well. To be surrounded by people who, in those times when I was weak, could kind of lift me up and give me strength in those moments. So I think through that, that's where you will find, where you do falter, being surrounded by a strong friend group, a strong community will really be something that helps you.
Man, that's so good. Thank you so much for joining us today, taking time
Thanks for having me, man.
out of that schedule. I'm going to tell the viewers it was hard to peg you down. You're a busy guy.
It was, but we finally got it done, so I'm glad that I was here.
We made a way, man. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you. And I just want to encourage everybody who's watching. We hope that this has been helpful to you. And like we always say, we want to try to get a story out every week so that we can keep sharing. And the testimony is powerful. So even just for everybody that's watching it, your story is unique to you. It will look different to everybody else's story, but your story is powerful, and God can and will use it if we would just have the boldness and the courage to share it when we get the moment. Yeah. So God bless you. We hope that you've enjoyed this video. Sija, thank you so much, man. Have a great week.
Thank you. Cheers.